Have you ever thought about where Santa and Mrs. Claus came from, or how they got aligned so tightly to Christmas? A lot of people say that Christmas couldn't come if it wasn't for Santa Claus. When Nicholas hears that, he gets very upset, and I've even seen him cry. You see, Nicholas teaches that Christmas comes from your heart. Before Santa Claus was a legend, he was a man, a real person like you or I. He was named Nikolaos by his parents when he was born in the year 280 A.D. He was born in Patara in the region of Asia Minor. Asia Minor is in the region we now know as Turkey. And Patara was a thriving town where ships came in loaded with merchandise from all over the known world. When the river changed, the business at Patara actually dried up. But that's not part of Santa's story. Nicholas's parents were very wealthy, being merchants, but they died when an epidemic raced through Patara. Nicholas was being tutored by a priest, so he continued his studies and living with the priest. It was not long before he became a priest in Patara. He was well respected as a priest and was soon invited to the church in Myra, where he was elected bishop, the youngest bishop ever in the history of Myra, at the age of 30 years old. Now, through the church as a priest and a bishop, Nicholas came to know about a lot of people who were needy. And so he decided to use his inheritance from his parents, the money he inherited from his parents, to help those in need. One of the most famous stories about how Nicholas helped a family in need has to do with a father and his 3 daughters. See, there was once a man who had 3 daughters, and as they came of age to marry, he had a dilemma. He did not have the money to pay a dowry. You see, in some cultures, the father must pay a dowry with the bride, and the dowry may be money or land or even livestock. So each time a daughter came of age, Nicholas snuck into the house and left a small bag of coins for the dowry. And during this time, he was also giving gifts and presents to those others in need, giving clothes and food and whatever was needed. Men of the village got to be curious who this mysterious benefactor was who snuck into houses in the middle of the night and left gifts. Nicholas made a game out of it, for he learned how to climb across the roofs and swing into windows. As a younger man, he was very agile, and he could have won a lot of Olympic gymnastic medals. Yes, Nicholas was a priest and a bishop and well respected. But more important than that, he was a thief of despair, bringing food and clothes to those in need. There was one time, Nicholas got word of the Roman army coming to Myra. They were coming to kill all the Christians. Nicholas quickly gathered up all the merchants and church leaders and met the Roman army on the outskirts of Myra. They refused to let any soldiers into the village, and not a single Christian died that day. But because of his bravery, Nicholas spent the next 10 years in jail, in prison. But the gifts continue to find the needy, making his legend even greater. You know, even today, everybody likes to be part of a good success story. The Roman Catholic Church says that in their history books, Nicholas of Myra, the Bishop of Myra, died on December the 6th of the year 340. Nicholas will tell you that that grave, his tomb, is empty. For when he died, he began to wander. And he wandered all over the Mediterranean region for 450 years, finding people in need and helping as he could. The church named Nicholas as a saint in the year 800 AD. And to this date, he is the second most popular saint in history, the most popular being the Blessed Mother Mary. Nicholas met a remarkable woman one day with a story almost as strange as his own. Natasha was born in the area we now know as northern Russia, early in the 5th century, about the year 408 AD. The village she lived in had adopted Christian traditions as well as maintaining their old midwinter celebration. Her mother went into labor on Midwinter's Eve, the longest night of the year. The leader of the village, who was not really a priest but the closest they had at the time, named her Natasha, for she was born on the eve of the Nativity. That's what Natasha means, born of the Nativity. She was the eldest of 7 brothers and sisters, and as the oldest, it was her responsibility to take care of her siblings. Her father was a tailor and also worked in the fields beside his wife. And being the oldest daughter, it was her job to take care of all the brothers and sisters while mom and dad worked. When she was 17, she became engaged to a gentleman who was about her age, an excellent farmer, handsome, strong, and she was in love. However, about a month before their wedding, he was attacked by a bear and killed. Natasha never overcame her grief, but she did begin taking care of her brothers and sisters' children as they got married. When Natasha was about 50 years old, her heart stopped as she was coming in from the fields. A grand funeral was held, for she was loved by everyone in the village and was related to most of them by marriage anyway. But like Nicholas, she did not die. She wandered around in a fog until she met Nicholas. One day, on the outskirts of Rome, well, as a matter of fact, it was the 17th of May of the year 802. She was wandering through a marketplace next to an orchard on the outskirts of Rome, and she saw some coins on the ground, so she bent down and picked them up, and she handed them to the merchant right there, and he just handed her a basket of fruit. Well, she didn't know what to do. Money wasn't hers, but rather than argue, she just carried the fruit over and sat down under a tree next to a gentleman about her age. Now, there's been a bit of discussion here about how she shared that fruit. What was the fruit that she shared? Nicholas will say every time that it was an apple, but Natasha will say it's a pear, just to tease Nicholas. They are quite a pair after all. It was an apple. It was. But Nicholas and Natasha completed one another the instant they spoke. They were married that very night under the stars and pledged their lives to one another for all eternity. They wandered around all over for almost forever, for years. But they could only stay in one village for just a few years, for people would start asking why they never aged. Then in the year 945, they entered the marketplace of a small town in northern Finland. They saw a small man carrying an armful of parcels, trying to get across the square, and some big buffoons were heckling him. And you could see the small man had been treated like this before, and he almost made it out of the square before one of the big men grabbed a package and tossed it over to his friend. And they started tossing the package back and forth over this little man's head. Well, Nicholas stepped into the middle of the fracas, reached up into the air, and snatched that parcel right out of the air. When these buffoons, these bullies, saw Nicholas, they ran to the other side of the square. For you see, they were much bigger than the little guy. But Nicholas was tall and a heavy coat and carried a great big walking stick. They were brave because they were so much larger than the little man. But Nicholas towered over them, and their courage ran. The small man introduced himself as Arbitarus. And when his eyes and Nicholas' eyes met, Arbitarus said the strangest thing. "We've been waiting for you. Are you ready to join us?" Nicholas looked over to Natasha, who was smiling, and he nodded. Moments later, Nicholas, Arbitarus, and Natasha were walking out of town to a barn just on the outskirts, where Arbitarus opened the doors to this old barn, and there was a sleigh with 2 small reindeer. Nicholas and Natasha got into the back, And Arbitraris put his parcels on the seat beside him. And when he shook the reins, they started their journey, going to a village to the north. But then as they got going, he shook the reins again. And those reindeer started moving faster. They actually stepped into the sky. And they were moving so fast, that sleigh barely cleared the bushes at first. But they were moving so fast, they didn't even leave a trail behind them. No way for anybody to follow them and find out where they were going. It wasn't long before they came to their destination, a village far to the north. Arbitraris took a circle around, turned, and gave a whistle to his reindeer, shook the reins again, and those reindeer flew even faster. It was remarkable how fast they were going, and they buzzed right through the center of that village with Arbitraris ringing a bell just as hard as he could. People standing along the street looked up, and they started to shout with delight and laughing. Arbitraris turned that sleigh around to the other side and set it down in the middle of town. They were immediately surrounded. The entire village, all the people of this village, had been waiting for Nicholas, and they loved Natasha just as much. And we now know that village as the North Pole. Having found a home now, Nicholas resumed his practice of taking care of those in need. And he delivered gifts made by the people of the North Pole, just as fast and often as he could. But his list of needs grew. Nicholas got so many requests for gifts that he decided to begin to do deliveries just on Christmas morning. And his first Christmas delivery around Holland and Scanidnavia came in the year 1210. But the list continued to grow. And as the list grew, he realized he couldn't do it just in one day. So he talked with the elders of the village at the North Pole. And they suggested that he use the miracle of the solstice second. This uncommon miracle extends one day to 60 days, which gave him plenty of time to deliver. Well, Nicholas, being a man of God, wanted to honor the Christ. And he wanted to stay on Christmas. So he said a prayer, and his prayer was answered. The miracle of that second was granted as Christmas is born, but only at the North Pole. When the Dutch came to America, they brought all of their traditions with them. And one of them was the receiving gifts from Sinterklaas on Christmas morning. And as they told everybody else about it, people from all nations had trouble pronouncing Sinterklaas, as the Dutch did. And his name became not Saint Nicholas or Sinterklaas, but Santa Claus. Natasha rode along with Nicholas on those early years, helping with the deliveries. But when the Dutch came to America about the year 1600, she stayed behind and kept the gift barn organized so that the deliveries could go off smoothly. You know, around the village at the North Pole, everybody knows and loves them as Nicholas and Natasha. But around the world, they are honored and loved as Santa and Mrs. Claus. Merry Christmas.